The sun on planet Virex was setting behind the red mountains. The sky turned dark purple, and the two moons slowly appeared. Human soldier Jake walked toward his camp, tired from patrol. His armor was dusty, his boots full of sand, but his mind was calm until he saw Kira waiting for him at the entrance of the tent. Kira was not human. She was from the canine species, humanoid in form, with soft fur on her arms and cheeks. Her ears were pointed, her tail long and expressive. She had big glowing eyes and sharp senses like a wolf, but she was kind, loyal, and a warrior. She and Jake had become close during their months on the battlefield. They fought together, laughed together, and even shared food in silence. But today, something was different. "Hey, Kira," Jake said, dropping his gear, but Kira didn't answer. She sniffed the air, her eyes narrowed, and her tail moved slowly behind her. Then she stepped close to Jake and looked into his eyes. "You smell strange," she said softly. Jake raised an eyebrow and laughed. "Well, I haven't showered in 2 days." But Kira didn't smile. She looked nervous, her claws tapping against her leg. "We need to talk," she said. "Alone." Jake nodded. Surprised by her serious tone, they entered the tent, and Kira closed the flap tightly. She sat on the ground, tail curled around her legs. Jake sat across from her, unsure what was going on. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You're acting weird." Kira looked away, then back at him, her voice low. "Do you remember that night in the storm?" she asked. Jake blinked. "The sandstorm? Of course, we almost died." "Yes," Kira said. "And we shared body heat, remember?" Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, we were freezing, and I held you close to keep you warm." Kira swallowed hard, her cheeks a bit darker. "There's something you don't understand about my kind," she said. "When a canary is hurt and touched by someone with strong feelings, it triggers changes." Jake leaned forward. "Changes? What kind of changes?" Kira stood up and lifted her shirt slightly. A faint golden glow pulsed softly under her skin. Her belly. Jake stared in shock. What is that?" Kira looked down and spoke in a trembling voice. "I didn't know it would happen. I didn't plan this," she said. "But I think I'm carrying your pups." Jake's mind stopped. His heartbeat grew louder. "Wait. What? That's not possible, right? We're different species." Kira looked at him with worried eyes. "We're more compatible than your people think," she whispered. "There have been stories. Old stories, hidden ones, about unions like this." Jake sat back, speechless. He tried to remember that night clearly. He remembered her injured leg, her shivering body, and the way she leaned into him. He remembered stroking her fur and calming her down. He didn't remember anything more. But now he doubted his memory. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. Kira nodded slowly. "The signs are clear, the glow, the dreams, the feelings." Jake rubbed his face, trying to breathe slowly. This is big, Kira." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm scared." There was silence in the tent, only the distant wind blowing across the desert. Kira stepped closer to him and placed his hand on her glowing belly. "Feel that," she said. Jake did, and his hand trembled. He could feel a faint movement. "Not strong, but they're real," he whispered. Kira nodded again. "And they're part of you." Jake looked into her eyes. "You should have told me earlier." "I was afraid," she admitted. "I didn't know how you'd react." Jake stood up and took a deep breath. "I don't know what this means, or what's going to happen," he said. "But I won't leave you, Kira." A soft smile appeared on her face. "Thank you, human," she whispered. Jake smiled too. Even if his mind was still spinning, this wasn't what he expected at the end of a long patrol. But now he had more than just a mission. He had a future to protect, outside. The stars filled the sky, inside. A new secret had just begun to grow. The stars above planet Virex twinkled like tiny fires. The desert winds howled outside the tent, cold and sharp. Jake could not sleep. His thoughts kept spinning in circles. Kyra was asleep on the floor beside him, her soft breath steady, but he stared at the roof of the tent, remembering every moment of that one strange night. It was almost a month ago. A violent sandstorm had trapped them inside a small cave. Kira had been wounded, a plasma burn across her thigh. They had no heat source, no coms, and almost no food. Jake had bandaged her leg and sat beside her. She had shivered nonstop. Even with his jacket on, in desperation, he had pulled her into his arms. At first it was just warmth. She pressed against him. Whimpering in pain, her fur had felt soft, her breathing shaky. He had stroked her back, telling her stories to calm her. She had nuzzled into his neck, and he remembered her whispering something in her language, something he didn't understand. At the time, now he wondered what it meant. Did they cross a line that night without knowing? Was there something deeper inside her species, a hidden biology that connected through touch and warmth? Jake turned to look at Kira, sleeping peacefully. Her arms were wrapped around her middle, and her glowing belly shimmered gently. There was life growing inside her, and he might be the father. The thought still felt unreal. Aliens and humans weren't supposed to mix, but Kira had always been different. She never treated him like a stranger, never saw him as just other. They had built trust through battle, hardship, and quiet moments. Suddenly, Kira stirred in her sleep, her ears twitching. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at him. "Still awake?" she asked softly. Jake nodded. "Can't stop thinking." She sat up, her tail curling beside her. "I had a dream," she said, voice low. "I saw 3 pups running through the sand." Jake smiled nervously. "Pups?" "Huh." She nodded. "One looked like you." He laughed a little, unsure what else to say. Kyra's eyes softened. "You're scared?" Jake took a breath. "A little, yeah." "Me too," she said. "But I don't regret anything." They sat in silence again, listening to the wind outside. Jake finally asked, "Do you think they'll be okay? I mean, half human, half canary?" Kyra looked down at her glowing belly and placed a hand over it. "They will be strong," she said. "They will carry the instincts of my kind and the heart of yours." Jake stared at her, surprised by how sure she sounded. "But will they be accepted?" he asked. "By your people? By mine?" Kyra's eyes darkened. "No," she said simply. "Not at first." Jake nodded slowly. "Then we'll protect them." Kira looked at him with new emotion in her eyes. She reached out and took his hand. "In my culture," she said, "if a male protects a female during her bonding time, it means he chooses to be her mate." Jake blinked. "Wait, is this... Are you saying we're..." She interrupted gently. "Only if you want it." Jake looked at her hand in his, then at her glowing belly. "I didn't plan this," he said. "But I'm not running away." Kira smiled. "Then you've already chosen." Jake moved closer and wrapped an arm around her. She rested her head against his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time. The tent felt warmer now, even with the cold outside. Kira whispered, "Do you want to hear the ancient story of the first canary-human union?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "There's more like us?" Kira nodded. "Only in legend." "Tell me," he said. She began the story, speaking in a soft, rhythmic voice. "Long ago, a human crash-landed on a canary moon. Injured and alone, he was found by a lone huntress. She nursed him back to health, and their bond grew strong. But the world hated them. One was prey, one was predator, yet they defied it all. They ran, they fought, and eventually, they created a hidden place where love could grow freely. Their children became myths, warriors of 2 worlds, neither fully one, but more than both." Jake listened to every word. When Kira finished, she looked at him and said, "Our pups may carry that same story forward." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "Then let's make sure they get to write their own." Outside, the sandstorm began to fade inside. Something far stronger was growing, not just life, but love and a dangerous hope. The next morning, the wind had settled. The desert was quiet again. but the air felt heavy. Jake stepped outside the tent and scanned the horizon with his scope. All seemed normal, no enemy signals, no patrols nearby. But his instincts told him something was wrong. Inside the tent, Kira was packing small things into a travel bag. Her movements were slow, careful, her hand often resting over her glowing belly. Jake walked back in and said, "You're acting like we're leaving." Kira nodded without looking up. "We are," she whispered. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "I thought we were safe here." Kira's eyes locked onto his, sharp and serious. "We were safe," she said. "Until last night," Jake frowned. "You had another dream?" She shook her head. "No, something worse." "I felt them." Jake stepped closer. "Felt who?" "The Watchers," Kira whispered. "The Canary High Council has sent scouts." Jake's chest tightened. "They know?" "Not everything," Kira replied. "But they know something is different about me." Jake sat down, rubbing his face. "Then we have a real problem," he muttered. Kira stood up and zipped her pack. "We can't stay here," she said. "If they find out I'm carrying hybrid pups, they will take me." Jake's voice grew sharp. "Take you? Why?" Kira looked down, her voice bitter. "In Canary law, cross-species breeding is forbidden," she said. "They call it corruption of blood." Jake stood slowly, his fists clenched. "That's insane." Kira looked away. "It's tradition." There was a long silence. Then Jake said, "All right, then we run." Kira looked surprised. "You'd leave your post? Your people?" Jake nodded. "You're my people now." Before they could move, a loud beeping sound echoed outside. Jake grabbed his rifle and ran out. On the ridge nearby, a black drone hovered in the sky. Its red lens blinked twice, then vanished into the clouds. Jake cursed. Too late. He turned and ran back into the tent. "We're exposed." That drone wasn't human tech. Kira's tail stiffened. "It was council grade." Jake nodded. "Then they're watching already." Kira's eyes went wide. "They'll send hunters." Jake moved fast, grabbing gear, weapons, rations. Kira followed, silent and steady. In less than 10 minutes they were gone, leaving the tent behind. Tracks covered by the wind, they hiked through the canyon trails, avoiding open paths. Jake used his scanner to detect movement ahead. But the deeper they went, the stranger things became. That night, while they rested in a shallow cave, Kira began to feel something inside her, a warm pressure, a stirring. She sat up straight, breathing hard. Jake rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" Kira clutched her belly, eyes glowing brighter than before. "They're reacting to danger," she said, gasping. Jake touched her arm gently. "What does that mean?" Kira's voice was full of fear. "They feel the threat," she whispered. "And they're trying to protect me, even now." Jake stared in shock. His unborn pups were responding to outside threats before birth. This wasn't just rare. This was powerful. Kira leaned back and closed her eyes. "They're not normal hybrids," she said softly. Jake asked, "Then what are they?" Kira's answer came slowly. "Something new," she whispered. "Stronger than either of us alone." Suddenly, Jake's scanner beeped. 3 red dots appeared on the screen, moving fast toward their position. Kira's eyes snapped open. "They're here," she growled. Jake stood up and loaded his rifle. "We fight?" he asked. Kira shook her head. "No, not yet." She pressed a button on her belt, and a blue shimmer wrapped around them. A camouflage field, ancient tech from her people. It would hide their heat signatures for only 5 minutes. They crouched together in silence as the hunters passed overhead. 3 tall figures in silver armor moved across the cliffs. Their visors scanned the rocks, but they moved on. The camouflage had worked. When the shimmer faded, Jake let out a breath. "We can't keep hiding," he said. Kira nodded. "Then we'll find higher ground." As they packed again, Jake looked at her. "Why is your council so afraid of hybrid children?" Kira paused, then said, "Because they don't know what these pups will become." Jake felt a chill run down his back. He looked at her belly. glowing softly again in the dark. Whatever was growing inside her wasn't just life, it was a secret the galaxy wasn't ready for, and they had to protect it, no matter what. The air had changed. It was quiet, too quiet. Jake stood outside the mountain shelter with his rifle in hand, scanning the distant ridge. He didn't like the silence. Even the wind had stopped, like the planet was holding its breath. Inside the cave, Kyra stirred restlessly. Her tail twitched and her breathing was shallow. Her ears turned toward sounds Jake couldn't even hear. Then she opened her glowing eyes and growled softly. "They're here," she whispered. Jake turned quickly. "You're sure?" Kyra nodded slowly. "3 of them, maybe 4. Jake tightened his grip on the rifle. "How close?" Kyra stood up carefully, placing one hand on her glowing belly. "Too close," she said. "They're hunting me by scent." Jake activated the motion sensors outside the cave. Tiny drones flew into the sky and began scanning the area. A second later, one of them sent back an image. 4 tall figures, armored in chrome, moving fast through the valley below. Each one carried a blade and a long energy spear. Jake's blood ran cold. "Are those?" Kyra nodded. "Elite Canary trackers." Jake knew what that meant. They weren't here to talk. They were here to end a secret that never should have started. Kyra looked at him, her voice low and sharp. "If they reach me, they won't stop. With me, they'll cut the pups out." Jake took a step toward her and knelt, placing his hands over hers. "I won't let that happen," he said. Her lips trembled. "Then we fight." But Kyra was not ready to run anymore. She turned and pulled a small object from her belt, a black shard with ancient carvings. "What's that?" Jake asked. Kyra held it up, and it began to glow. "A bloodstone," she said. "It calls the spirits of my ancestors." Jake's eyes widened. "Spirits?" Kyra placed the stone on the ground, and a faint hum began to echo through the cave. Walls, blue light rose from the floor, shaping itself into old figures, tall warriors with glowing eyes and fierce faces. They didn't speak, but nodded at Kyra. She bowed her head, whispering something in her native tongue. Then the cave pulsed once, and a layer of energy spread across the entrance. "A shield," Kyra said. "It will hold for a short time." Jake stared at her, amazed. "You never told me your people had this kind of power." Kyra looked tired, but proud. "My kind forgot it, but the pups awakened it in me." Outside, a sharp howl echoed through the valley. The first hunter had arrived. Jake ran to the cave entrance and peeked over the edge. He saw a tall Canary warrior with silver fur and red eyes standing in the snow. He sniffed the air, then looked directly at Jake's position. Even the shield couldn't hide them anymore. Kyra stepped beside Jake, her claws glowing with energy. "They want blood," she said. "Then let's give them a reason to bleed." The shield flickered, then dropped. The first spear came flying, missing Jake's head by inches. He fired back, striking the enemy in the leg. But the Canary warrior didn't even slow down. Kyra leapt forward and slashed through the air, her claws cutting deep into the warrior's armor. A second enemy charged in from the side, swinging a glowing blade. Jake ducked, rolled, and fired into his chest. The hunter fell, twitching. But there were still 2 more. Jake turned to warn Kyra, but she was already bleeding from her side. He screamed, "Kyra!" She dropped to her knees, gasping, but her eyes were burning with rage. Her belly glowed brighter than ever, and her fur began to shine. Then something happened that Jake would never forget. Kyra let out a cry, a roar that shook the rocks around them. From her body, golden light exploded outward, throwing both hunters backward. They hit the cliffs hard and didn't move again. Jake rushed to Kyra, catching her before she collapsed. "You did it," he whispered. Kyra coughed and smiled weakly. "No." "They did." She placed his hand on her belly. "Our pups? They gave me strength." Jake held her close, his arms tight around her. She was breathing fast but still alive. He looked at the ground, at the bodies of the elite warriors. What they just survived wasn't just an attack, it was a warning. They won't stop Kira whispered. Jake nodded. Then we don't stop either. He helped her to her feet. They still had a long road ahead, but now he knew just how powerful their unborn children were and what they represented. A future that scared even the strongest warriors in the galaxy. The sun rose slowly over the silent mountains. The snow glowed golden under its light. Jake sat beside a small fire inside a new cave, carefully wrapping a bandage around Kira's wound. She winced, but didn't cry. Her strength was still there. Deeper now, older, stronger. You should rest, Jake said softly. Kira shook her head, her ears twitching. There's no time, she whispered. Jake looked at her with concern. You're bleeding and tired. She looked at her belly, which now pulsed with a soft golden light. I'm not tired, she said. I'm changing. Jake leaned back slowly. Changing? Kira looked at her hands, at the soft fur turning silver near her wrists. My kind has legends, she said, of a bloodline that only awakens when a canary mates with someone. Different, Jake frowned. You mean human? Kira nodded. When love crosses species, something old wakes up, something the elders tried to bury. Jake stared at her glowing body. The cave seemed brighter around her, warmer too. Even the wind outside had calmed. What's happening to you? He asked quietly. Kira placed both hands on her belly and said, They're giving me strength, not just as a mother, but as something more. That night, Kira's body began to shift, not in pain, not in fear. Her fur shimmered like stardust, and her muscles pulsed with energy. Jake could feel it even without touching her. She wasn't just Kira anymore. She was becoming something ancient, something the canary had long forgotten. She stood up slowly, her back straight, her tail curled high with power. Jake whispered, Kira? Her eyes were glowing like twin suns. I feel them, she said softly. Our pups. They're speaking to me. Jake blinked. Speaking? Kira nodded, not with words, but with feeling. They're afraid, but brave, and they want to survive. Jake watched her closely. There was no fear in her now, only calm. She walked outside the cave, barefoot in the snow, and raised her arms to the sky. The clouds above moved like they were listening to her. The air shimmered around her body, forming shapes Jake couldn't explain. Suddenly, the mountains echoed with a sound, not wind, not thunder, but a voice, a low, rumbling growl that made the earth vibrate. Kira turned back to Jake and smiled. I called them, she said. Jake stood quickly. Who? Kira closed her eyes. My ancestors, the real ones, in the distance. Lights began to appear, small, golden orbs floating toward them through the trees. One by one, they entered the cave and circled Kira's body. Each one glowed with symbols and whispered in her native tongue. Jake couldn't understand, but he could feel the emotion, pride, strength, and deep, deep love. Kira whispered something back to them. Then the orbs disappeared, vanished like smoke in sunlight. She turned toward Jake and said, They gave me a gift. Jake asked, What kind of gift? Kira raised her hand, and a small flame flickered in her palm. But it wasn't fire. It was a heartbeat, glowing gold, pulsing softly. Jake stared, amazed. That's from them. Kira nodded. This power will protect the pups and you and me. Jake stepped forward, placing a hand over hers. I'll protect you too, he said. She smiled. I know. That night, something strange happened. Jake had a dream. He saw Kira in her true form, taller, glowing, her fur like silver flame. She stood in a field of stars, holding 3 small pups in her arms. They each had different eyes, one blue like Jake's, one gold like hers, and one that changed every second. The youngest looked at Jake and smiled. We are the new future, the pup said. Then Jake woke up, heart racing beside him. Kira whispered, I saw it too. Jake looked at her, shocked. The dream? She nodded. They're not just children, Jake. They're a message. He sat up. A message to who? Kira's voice grew strong again. "To the galaxy," she said. "That the old rules are breaking, and something better is coming." Jake felt a mix of fear and wonder. He had joined the military to protect Earth, to fight battles across stars. But now he was part of something bigger, not a war, but a birth, the beginning of a new kind of life, and the galaxy wasn't ready for it. But it was coming anyway. The snow had melted by the time Jake and Kira reached the old outpost. It stood on a high cliff, built from steel and stone, surrounded by electric fences and old solar panels. Jake had once called this place home. Now it felt cold, unfamiliar, dangerous. Kira walked beside him, hood over her head, belly wrapped tightly under layers. Her glowing skin was hidden beneath a gray cloak. Jake had warned her. No one could know, not yet. The council hunters had failed, but human fear could still destroy them both. As they entered the gates, a few soldiers looked up. Confused but not alarmed, Jake saluted and kept walking. He didn't stop to talk or explain. Kira stayed silent, her eyes scanning every corner, her tail hidden beneath her coat. Inside the command center, Commander Rourke sat behind a desk. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Jake," he said. "Back from the wilds, huh?" Jake gave a short nod, had to disappear for a while. Rourke's eyes drifted toward Kira. "You brought her back," he said, voice neutral. Jake said nothing. They sat, and Jake explained parts of the story, the storm, the injuries, the attacks. He left out the bond, the pups, the truth. But Rourke was no fool. He leaned forward slowly and said, "Tell me something, soldier. Why does the alien look different?" Kyra's hand clenched under the table. Jake answered calmly, "She's been through a lot." Rourke stared at Jake, eyes narrowing. "We received an encrypted transmission from the Canary," he said slowly. "They claim one of their females broke a sacred law, one involving a human." Jake's heart skipped. Kira looked down silent. Rourke stood up and walked to the window. "Now tell me, Jake," he said. "Is there something you want to confess?" Jake hesitated. He thought about lying. But what would that change? Rourke already knew, so Jake stood, lifted his chin, and said, "She's pregnant." Rourke turned sharply. "Excuse me?" Jake's voice grew firmer. "She's carrying hybrid children, mine." For a second, no one moved. Then Rourke's face darkened. "That's not possible," he said. Kira raised her eyes, her voice calm. "It's not only possible. It's happening." Rourke walked over and slammed his hand on the table. "You don't understand what this means," he growled. Jake stepped between them. "I do." "No, you don't," Rourke barked. "This isn't just about biology. It's about war, about power, about fear." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small remote. Pressed it. The door behind them locked, and security systems powered up. Jake reached for his rifle, but two guards rushed in with stunned batons. Rourke raised a hand. "Don't hurt him. Just keep them both here." Kira stood slowly, her voice like ice. "So this is your answer?" Rourke looked at her. "We have to study it." "It?" Jake snapped. "She's not a lab rat, and those are not test subjects inside her." Rourke spoke coldly. "If what you say is true, then those children are the most valuable thing in the galaxy." Jake stepped closer. "And you think locking us up will make them safe?" "They'll be protected," Rourke said. "Controlled," Kira hissed. "That's what you mean." Suddenly, the air in the room shifted. Kira's eyes glowed brighter, and her body shimmered with heat. The same power from the cave returned, and her voice changed. "You will not touch them." Energy burst from her hands, knocking the guards back against the wall. The lights flickered, the ground shook. Jake grabbed Kira's arm. "Not here. We need to get out." She nodded, breathing hard. They ran through the halls as alarms blared. Soldiers shouted, trying to stop them. But Kira moved like a flame, dodging and stunning with golden sparks. Jake fired only when he had to, avoiding harm outside. A transport shuttle waited, old rusty, but still flying. Jake activated it and helped Kira inside. The engines roared to life, and they shot into the sky. Below them, the outpost burned in confusion. Inside the cockpit, Kira slumped into the seat. Her body shook, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Jake took her hand. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. "They betrayed us," she said. Jake looked ahead at the stars. "Then we find a place where no one can." The stars stretched around them. Somewhere out there, a safe world waited. They had no home, no allies, and no plan. But they had each other, and 3 tiny heartbeats that refused to be stopped. The stars above shimmered like fireflies as the shuttle drifted through open space. Its engines were quiet, its lights dim, and inside, silence wrapped the cabin like a blanket. But that silence was soon broken by a sharp breath. Kira clutched her belly, her claws digging into the seat. A soft cry escaped her lips. Jake turned quickly from the control panel and rushed to her side. "Kira, what's wrong?" he asked, voice shaking. She looked at him, sweat on her brow, eyes glowing bright gold. "It's time," she whispered. "They're coming." Jake froze for a moment, not from fear, but from awe. The moment they had fought for, bled for, run from both their species for, had arrived. He helped her into the med bay at the back of the shuttle. There were no nurses, no doctors, just Jake and Kira, and 3 little lives waiting to enter the universe. Kira lay on the bed, breathing hard. Her fur bristled, her body glowing with energy. Jake held her hand, trying to keep his heart steady. She looked at him with pain and pride in her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. Jake leaned close. "You're the strongest being I've ever met." She gave a small, tired smile. "Say that again." "After I bite your hand." The shuttle shook lightly as they drifted into orbit over an uninhabited moon. A small place, quiet and untouched. It would be their home, at least for now. Then the first sound came, not from Kira, but from deep within. A pulse of light burst from her belly, then a soft cry, faint, high and alive. Kira gasped, her entire body glowing like starlight. Jake's eyes widened. "Is that?" "Yes," Kira breathed. "The first one." With trembling hands, Jake helped her sit up. The glow around her chest faded, and from her arms, a tiny shape emerged. Wrapped in soft fur, eyes still shut, body warm and pulsing with life, Kira held the newborn pup gently, pressing it close to her heart. Jake knelt beside her, speechless. The tiny creature had a small tail, tiny ears, and soft features that mirrored both their faces. One eye opened slowly. It was bright blue, Jake's color. "He's beautiful," Jake whispered. Kira nodded, tears falling freely now. "Our son," she said, voice trembling. The pup let out another cry, louder this time, and in that single sound everything changed. Far away, something stirred in space. Ancient satellites picked up the cry, recording its strange frequency. Across different sectors, machines beeped, and old warnings blinked to life. On the Canary homeworld, elders paused their rituals as the cry echoed in their minds. On Earth, deep within secret labs, scientists froze, unable to explain the sudden spike in biological readings. But none of it mattered in that small shuttle. All that mattered was a mother, a father, and a newborn pup breathing his first breath. As Kira rocked him gently, Jake kissed her forehead. "I promise I'll protect him," he said. Kira looked into his eyes. "You already have." The second cry came moments later, soft, curious, as another life joined them. A little girl this time, with glowing gold eyes and a quiet strength in her tiny fists. Then the third, louder, wilder, a pup who kicked and growled even as he was born. Jake laughed with tears in his eyes. "They already have personalities." Kira nodded, exhausted but glowing. Their hours, later, as they lay together, the 3 pups sleeping between them. Jake looked out the shuttle window. He saw the stars stretch forever. And yet, here, in this small space, was the beginning of something bigger than war or borders. A human and a canary had done what no treaty or council ever could. They had created life that belonged to both worlds. Not a mistake, not an accident. A message. Kira whispered, "What do we call him?" The first one, Jake smiled. Hope, she nodded. And the others? Jake looked at them and said, Unity? And flame. Outside, the stars kept moving. Inside, new life had begun. The war would rage on somewhere, the councils would argue, the soldiers would chase shadows. But here, on this moon, in this small family, something far stronger had been born, love, and 3 tiny hearts that would shake the future.